Right now then, welcome to the Friday vlog. I can't keep talking about September the 1st like I have through most of August because we're past it. I know we're past it because I've seen the over 60 quality improvement posters that have come in, and just as excitingly, and thank you to our ward managers, we've seen the various notices and advertisements that have gone up for our new ward visiting timetable that we have consistently now at Ardash across much of our organisation. We know that those changes will then be followed on in October by the therapeutic activities timetable, where you will remember that whether it's pet therapy or peer support, film night or reading clubs, we are going to have an activity every single day, 7 days of the week across all of our wards. Having been pretty positive in a lot of the vlogs I've posted recently and talked about your successes, your awards, the amazing improvements being made to waiting times, and I've posted Roberta's fantastic film once again in the link with this vlog. I'm going to spend the rest of this talking about two, I think, really quite difficult subjects. So fair warning as we go, if you like. We've had NHS planning guidance for next year. That's very welcome to see. And it confirms what we heard in the 10-year plan that was published earlier in the summer. And what I mean by that is that there is no new money, and that effectively the leadership ask is to recycle the funds that the NHS already has locally. Now, those of you who've spent time in rooms, conversations with me over the last couple of years will recognise that reference to recycling. What I mean by that is we have to take the money we have and spend it more wisely and better, move it from things we've historically spent it on to the things that our patients, carers and communities most need. I cannot pretend that that will be easy or straightforward. I suspect as you do more of it, it gets somewhat harder. So actually the opposite of the recycling metaphor, if you like. Let me be a bit more specific then as we think about next year. In August, you got paid your annual cost of living pay award, as I did, and you got the back pay and you have that going forward. Regrettably, the national funding agreements reached between leaders in the NHS and the trade unions, whilst things we would all want to support, do not come with a guarantee of national funding for those sums. What that means, due to a wrinkle in the funding formula, is an organisation like Ardash, every time we have a pay award, effectively needs to make a series of cuts to pay for it. Now, I'm advised that that is typically round about just over £2 million in any given year. And of course, it's a recurrent thing. In other words, it happens every year. So that's a little bit round about 1% of our turnover that we will need to find to pay for the pay awards that we have. We also know that from April of next year, all of the sort of subsidies that are built into NHS funding flows locally will be removed. They were built up during the pandemic period. For Ardash, again, that's a little over £2 million, so another 1% that we need to find in order to meet that obligation. We don't know precisely what the efficiency index will be for next year, where we have to return money to the system by doing the same care but more effectively and efficiently for less money. But I'm going to estimate that that is typically in the range of 2%. So you can see I've got to 4% already in my calculation. But then we're grateful for the funding we receive from local government, but we are largely funded by the commissioning decisions of two integrated care boards, South Yorkshire and then Humber and North Yorkshire for residents in North Links. Both of those organisations have sizable underlying recurrent deficits. In the case of South Yorkshire, that's round about 4 to 5% of their budget. So it would be reasonable to expect, looking into next year, that as they too have a statutory obligation to balance their budget, that we will receive less money from our funders than we have in the past. I'll stop there. There'll be colleagues in the finance department adding several lines to the story I've just told you and getting, understandably, to a bigger number. But I guess my point is that there are choppy and challenging waters ahead. And we need to face those things, and we need to face them with honesty and transparency. I will never do anything other than tell you the unvarnished version of what's really going on in the leadership of NHS organisations. That does not mean, and I had this discussion with new inductees on Monday where they asked some fantastic and challenging questions, that does not mean that the message is there is no money. You know what I'm going to say next. We will always find money for safety. Chair's been very clear about that. I can be clear with you, as can the rest of the board. But it does mean that we are going to have to make some difficult and challenging choices. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is he telling me this now? It's 6-7 months till next year. Well, it is our judgment that if we're going to have to do difficult things, we are best to take a long run up at them. Gives us a chance to talk them through, evaluate them, balance them, challenge them, give people the opportunity to disagree. But it inevitably means that we begin to talk about maybes and possiblies, and that can be disconcerting. So there's a balance of risk there, but I think in all honesty, it's right that we do begin to have these conversations. Sometimes we'll get those conversations wrong, and I know in one of my communications to some colleagues earlier in the week that I've framed things in such a way some people are distressed and offended, and I apologise for that. People do make mistakes, I make mistakes, and it wouldn't have been my intention for people to be distressed. So we need to continue the conversation that we're going to have as an organisation over the next 6 months. Lots of other trusts will be doing exactly the same. We are not unique or unusual, but we do need to begin to have a very transparent and honest conversation. The board will look at some options when it meets at the end of September. I'll talk to you some more about this in October. Now, I said it doesn't mean we stop everything. Well, I mean, to illustrate the point, next week we launch our new psychedelics included research collaboration with a company called Clerkenwell, which is one of the first such trial centres outside of London. I think we're leading the way for the North with what we will announce in the middle of next week. I'm really looking forward to welcoming commercial partners and community partners to that conversation, rooted in grounded research, but very much to the benefit of and drawing on the organisation as a whole. Likewise, it was terrific last week to see us sign off the garden designs for the future of the ward gardens that we have. You know that we've been doing a lot of rewilding within our sites. Part of that is about us then being able to repurpose the time of our expert gardeners into getting our clinical spaces absolutely right. The gardens are a key part of any ward. To be honest, our wards are pretty cramped if you wall off the garden and do not use it. So it's absolutely right that we invest money, time, love and attention in getting those spaces to be therapeutic. Back to where I started this vlog. I said I wanted to talk about some difficult things. And I want to end this vlog with perhaps the one that for me this week has been most difficult. We'll come back to this next week too, because I'll be doing one of my interviews with one of our staff governors, and I suspect she and I will talk, among other things, about racism inside Ardash. And if that message jars, let's be honest, if you do not see racism inside our organisation, then there's a listening opportunity there, because there's certainly experiences of racism in our organisation. But I guess what I wanted to talk to you just here today before we finish is the walk you might take through your area, the drive you might take through your area. And as you do, increasingly you'll see flags, you see graffiti, you'll see disgusting racist slurs at individuals. And you have your own reactions to that, but it amounts to a hostile environment for many of the people that we have grown up with, that we work with, that we care for and that we love. We will all have our own sense of identity. Tim and Donna have helped me with flags of identity and origin for staff who work right now in Ardash. I don't think we need to choose one identity over another. Many people will have multiple and blended identities. But what I do think is that when you paint the roundabout outside my house or you graffiti something down the street, you are not simply expressing yourself. You are trying to have an influence on those that we live among. And I just think we need to reflect on how that influence plays out, the harm and the hurt that it can create, the sense of intimidation and a lack of welcome. That applies to people who've grown up here over many generations, but it also applies to people who have come here seeking sanctuary or refuge. In our board meeting in May, we listened to the story of an Eritrean refugee. She escaped that country to avoid lifetime conscription into the military, conscription without an end date. She was trafficked, raped and abused in her journeys across Europe. And she has found, thanks in part to services provided by Ardash, a new life and an opportunity of recovery in this country. If you happen to follow me on social media, you'll know after Crystal Palace, I probably tweet about refugees being welcome more than anything else. I think it's astonishingly important that the measure of who we are is our ability to say to people in fear and in pain, but with hope and seeking opportunity, that you are welcome here. There's a health component to that, but there's a human component to that too. And when we talk about values in our organisation, I hope those values are a part of what you would want to endorse. Thanks for listening.